The sound didn't come from the sky, it came from the man's chest. A broken, uneven breath that fought its way through blood, dust, and collapsing strength, barely audible beneath the violent howl of the desert wind, but real, still real, and that single fragile sound was the only thing standing between life and complete silence in a battlefield that had already moved on, already decided, already erased him from its future, leaving him there, alone, forgotten, except he wasn't alone, because a few feet away, standing motionless against the storm, was a German shepherd who refused to accept that decision, whose eyes remained locked on the man as if the entire war had narrowed down to this one moment, this one life, this one choice. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, an ocean of sand swallowing everything that didn't move fast enough, and today, it was winning, slowly burying the wreckage of what used to be a convoy, twisted metal sticking out of the ground like broken bones, smoke rising in thin fading lines, the smell of fuel and fire still lingering in the air, and in the middle of it all lay the soldier, half covered already, his uniform torn open, blood dried into dark layers across his chest and arms. His skin pale beneath the dirt, lips cracked, eyes barely open, struggling to focus on anything that still made sense. Hours earlier, everything had been different. There had been voices, movement, purpose. Engines humming under control, radios alive with communication, boots stepping with direction, not fear, and the dog had been there too. Not just present, but aware, moving beside him with the kind of silent understanding that didn't need words, the kind built over months, maybe years, of shared danger, shared silence, shared trust that most people would never fully understand, because what existed between them wasn't just training, it was something deeper, something that had formed slowly in moments no one else ever noticed. And then, it all disappeared. One flash. One shockwave. One moment where everything broke. The explosion didn't just hit the convoy, it erased it, tearing through metal, throwing bodies, ripping control away from everyone in a matter of seconds, leaving behind nothing but noise and confusion, and somewhere in that chaos, the soldier had been thrown clear, not saved, just separated, separated from the only people who could have helped him, separated from safety, from backup, from any chance of immediate survival. Except, the dog didn't get separated. It chose not to. When everything else moved away, when instinct told it to follow the retreat, to survive, to escape the danger that still lingered in the air, it turned, not forward, but back, running against the chaos, against the noise, against the natural instinct of survival, its body moving with purpose through smoke and debris until it found him, until it reached the one thing that mattered more than safety itself. Now, it stood there, watching him fade. The wind grew stronger, pushing sand across the ground in waves, each gust covering more of his body, filling the air with particles that scratched against skin, against fur, against everything exposed, and still, the dog didn't move away, instead lowering itself beside him again, pressing close, using its own body as a shield, its fur catching the sand that would have settled directly on him, its presence creating a small barrier in a place where no protection should exist. The soldier's fingers moved slightly. Just once. Barely noticeable. But the dog saw it. Its head lifted instantly, eyes sharpening, body tensing as it leaned closer, its nose touching his face again, nudging him, gently at first, then more insistently, as if trying to pull him back from wherever he was drifting, as if refusing to let him disappear without a fight. His breathing stuttered. A weak inhale. Then nothing. Then again, another broken breath. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was something. And for the dog, that was enough to stay. Time passed in a way that didn't feel real, stretched between moments that felt too long and breaths that felt too short, the sun beginning its slow descent, turning the sky into something darker, something colder, something that signaled the next phase of survival, the one where temperature drops, where the desert becomes just as dangerous as the war itself, where bodies that are already weak don't last long. The dog shifted slightly, standing up again, its ears catching something, faint, distant, almost lost beneath the storm. It froze, listening, waiting. The sound came again, weak, inconsistent, but there. Movement. Far away. Maybe vehicles. Maybe something else. Its eyes locked onto the horizon, body leaning forward as if ready to run, but it didn't move. Not yet, because behind it, the soldier's breathing slowed again, weaker than before, closer to stopping than continuing. The dog looked back at him. For a long moment, it didn't move at all. Just stood there, between two choices. Stay, and watch him fade. Or leave, and try to find help that might never come. The wind howled louder. The sound in the distance grew slightly clearer, but still uncertain. And then, the soldier's chest stopped moving. Just for a second. Just one. But enough? The dog reacted instantly, rushing back to him, nudging harder this time, paw pressing against his chest, pushing, demanding something from a body that was already giving up. Its breathing quickening, movements sharper, more urgent, as if understanding that time had just run out. Another second passed. Nothing. Then suddenly, a weak inhale. Barely there. But real. Still real. The dog froze for a moment, then stood again, turning toward the distant sound one more time, this time without hesitation, its decision made in something deeper than instinct, deeper than fear. It wasn't leaving him. It was going to bring the world back to him. And with that, it ran. Straight into the storm. Leaving the soldier behind, for the first time, not to abandon him, but to save him. And as the distance between them grew, as the wind swallowed its form into the endless desert, the battlefield remained silent once more, except for one fragile, fading breath that still refused to disappear. Not yet, not while something out there was still fighting to bring him back. Part 2 right in paragraph. Without heading, the storm swallowed the dog almost instantly, turning its shape into nothing more than a moving shadow against an endless wall of sand. But it didn't slow down, didn't hesitate, because somewhere deep in its instincts, something had already decided that distance didn't matter anymore. Fear didn't matter anymore, only direction mattered, only the faint sound it had heard. The possibility of movement, of life, of something beyond the silence that was closing in behind it, and its body pushed forward through the resistance of the wind, muscles straining, eyes narrowing against the grains of sand that hit like tiny blades, each step uncertain but committed, driven by something far stronger than survival alone, because survival would have meant staying, conserving energy, waiting. But this was different. This was a choice to move when everything said stay still. A decision made not out of instinct, but out of something that felt almost human in its urgency. Behind it, the soldier lay where the desert had claimed him, his body growing colder against the shifting ground, sand slowly rising around him, covering edges, softening outlines, turning a living person into something the environment could begin to forget, his breathing weaker now, barely visible, barely there, each inhale more delayed than the last, his mind drifting in and out of awareness, caught between memory and nothingness. Flashes of sound echoing faintly, voices that weren't there anymore, faces that had already disappeared into the past, and somewhere within that fading consciousness, there was a moment, brief and fragile, where he became aware of the absence, aware that something that had been beside him was no longer there, and even in that near unconscious state, something inside him resisted it, something tried to reach for it, but his body didn't respond, couldn't respond. And that moment slipped away just as quickly as it had come, leaving him again in silence. The dog kept running. The terrain shifted beneath its paws, from loose sand to harder ground and back again, uneven, unpredictable, forcing constant adjustment, but it adapted without slowing, weaving through what little visibility the storm allowed, guided not by sight but by direction, by the faint memory of that sound, that movement, and as seconds stretched into something longer, something heavier, the sound grew slightly clearer, still distant, still uncertain, but enough to confirm it wasn't imagination. It wasn't the storm playing tricks. It was real. Something was out there. A low rumble. Mechanical. Faint, but real. The dog pushed harder, its breathing now heavy, chest rising and falling rapidly, but it didn't stop, because stopping meant losing the direction, losing the only chance it had to bring something back, and as the storm shifted slightly, just enough to reveal shapes beyond the blur, the outline of movement appeared ahead, dark forms cutting through the sand, slow but steady, vehicles, not many, but enough, and the dog's pace changed instantly, not slowing, but focusing, its path adjusting toward them with precision, every movement calculated now, no longer searching, but reaching. Inside those vehicles, the world was different. Controlled, contained. Voices spoke through static-filled radios, coordinates exchanged, orders repeated, but beneath all of it was tension, the kind that comes when something doesn't feel complete, when something has been left behind that shouldn't have been, and even though the mission had already shifted, even though the official call had been made to move on, to regroup, there was a quiet awareness among them that not everything had been accounted for. Not everything had been finished. And then, one of them saw it. At first, it looked like nothing. Just movement in the storm. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. But it kept moving. Closer. Faster. And then it became clear. A dog. Running straight toward them. Not random. Not lost. Focused. Intentional. The vehicle slowed slightly, confusion cutting through the controlled atmosphere inside, eyes narrowing, trying to understand what they were seeing, because this didn't fit, this wasn't expected, and as the dog reached them, it didn't stop at a distance, didn't hesitate, it moved directly to the side of the vehicle, barking, sharp, urgent, louder than the storm itself in that moment, its body tense, turning, moving back a few steps, then forward again, repeating the motion, as if trying to say something without words, as if trying to pull them in a direction they hadn't planned to go. At first, there was hesitation, a glance between them, a moment of uncertainty. But the dog didn't stop. It kept barking, kept moving, kept insisting. And there was something in the way it did it, something that didn't feel like panic, didn't feel like confusion, but something deliberate, something that demanded attention, and slowly, that hesitation began to shift into something else, something heavier, something that felt like a question no one wanted to answer but couldn't ignore. Because if the dog had come from somewhere, then something was still out there, something unfinished, something alive. The engine idled. The wind howled. And for a moment, everything balanced on a decision that would either be ignored or followed. The dog turned again, looking back into the storm, waiting, as if it already knew what would happen next. And then, finally, the vehicle changed direction. Part 3 right in paragraph without heading the moment the vehicle shifted, even slightly, something changed in the dog's movement, its body snapping into a different kind of focus, not frantic anymore, not uncertain, but purposeful, as if that one decision had confirmed everything it had been trying to communicate, and without waiting, it turned and ran again, not away this time, but leading, cutting back into the storm with a speed that carried urgency in every step, and behind it, the vehicle followed, slower, heavier, fighting against the resistance of the wind and sand, its engine pushing forward through conditions that made visibility almost non-existent, but still it moved, because now there was something to move toward, something more than just coordinates and orders, something that couldn't be measured on a map or confirmed through a radio signal. Inside, the tension grew, not louder, but sharper, quieter in a way that made it heavier, because no one spoke about it directly, no one said it out loud, but they all understood what this meant, understood the risk of turning back, understood the uncertainty of what they were following, and yet none of that was enough to stop them. Not anymore. Not after seeing the way the dog had moved, the way it had looked at them, the way it had refused to leave, and somewhere beneath all the logic, beneath all the training and protocol, something deeper had taken over, something that felt like responsibility. The dog didn't slow. It couldn't. Every second mattered now in a way that didn't need explanation, because back there, buried beneath the storm, time wasn't just passing, it was running out, and the further they moved from that moment, the closer they got to losing it completely. And as the storm shifted again, opening briefly in unpredictable waves, the terrain ahead became clearer in flashes, broken shapes, scattered debris, the faint outline of what had once been the convoy, and the dog pushed harder, its paws striking the ground with precision despite the instability beneath it, its body driven by something that refused to let exhaustion take control. Then suddenly, it stopped. Not slowly. Not cautiously. Instantly. Its entire body locking into place as it reached a point that looked like nothing more than shifting sand, its head lowering, nose pressing into the ground, breathing quick, sharp, searching, and then it moved again, circling once, twice, before stopping in one exact spot, digging, paws cutting through the surface, throwing sand backward in quick, urgent bursts, faster and faster, until the ground began to give way, revealing something beneath, something darker, something that didn't belong to the desert. Behind it, the vehicle came to a halt. The engine cut. Silence pressed in again, broken only by the wind and the frantic sound of paws tearing through sand, and for a brief moment no one moved, as if they were waiting for confirmation, waiting for something that would turn this into more than just a guess, more than just a possibility, and then they saw it. A hand. Barely visible. Partially buried. Still. Too still. Everything changed in that second. Movement exploded into action, doors opening, boots hitting the ground, hands moving quickly, digging, pulling, clearing away the sand that had already begun to claim what was left, and the dog didn't stop, didn't step back, it stayed right there, digging alongside them, refusing to let distance exist between it and the man it had left behind, its movements relentless, focused, as if this moment was the only thing that had ever mattered. The soldier's body emerged slowly, piece by piece, revealed from beneath the weight of the desert, his uniform barely recognizable now, covered in layers of dust and blood, his face pale, almost lifeless, his chest still, for a moment that felt too long, too final, and the air around them shifted, that quiet, heavy realization beginning to settle in before it was even spoken. Then, one of them reached down, two fingers pressing lightly against his neck. Searching. Waiting. Nothing. A second passed. Then another. The dog froze. Completely still. Its eyes locked on the man's face, unmoving, unblinking, as if it was holding on to something invisible, something that hadn't left yet, something that couldn't leave yet. And then, a faint pulse. Barely there. Weak. Unstable. But real. Everything shifted again. Voices rose, sharper now, urgency cutting through hesitation, hands moving faster, more precise, lifting him carefully, checking his breathing, adjusting his position, doing everything they could to pull him back from the edge he had already begun to fall from, and through it all, the dog stayed right beside him, pressing close, its presence constant, unbreakable, as if it refused to let that fragile connection slip away again. The storm continued around them, still violent, still unforgiving, but for the first time since everything had fallen apart, it wasn't winning. Because something had changed. Something had been brought back. And as they lifted him into the vehicle, securing him, stabilizing him as best as they could in the chaos of the moment. The dog didn't hesitate, didn't wait for permission. It jumped in beside him, positioning itself close, its body pressing against his side, its head lowering near his chest, listening, always listening, as if that faint, fragile rhythm was the only sound that mattered in a world still filled with noise. The engine started again. The vehicle turned. And this time, they weren't leaving something behind. They were carrying something back. Something that should have been lost, but wasn't. And as the storm swallowed the battlefield once more, erasing the last traces of what had happened there, one thing remained certain. This story wasn't over. Not even close. Part 4. Write in paragraph without heading. The vehicle pushed forward through the storm with a different kind of urgency now. Not the controlled movement of a retreat, but something heavier, something more fragile, because inside, everything had shifted from mission to survival, from objective to one single life hanging by a thread that could snap at any second, and the man lay stretched across the narrow space, barely conscious, his body trembling in subtle, uncontrolled ways, each breath uneven, shallow, as if his lungs were fighting against something deep inside, something they couldn't overcome alone. And beside him, the dog remained pressed close, unmoving except for the rise and fall of its chest, its head positioned near his ribs, listening, always listening, as if every breath he took passed through it first, as if it was measuring something no one else could feel. Hands moved quickly around him, checking wounds, pressing cloth against bleeding that refused to fully stop, trying to stabilize what had already gone too far. But there was a limit to what could be done here, in a moving vehicle, in the middle of a desert that offered no real protection, no real help, and everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud, because saying it would make it real in a way they weren't ready to accept yet. And still, they worked, because working meant fighting, and fighting meant he wasn't gone. Not yet. The dog didn't interfere. It didn't move out of the way either. It simply adjusted, shifting slightly when hands needed space, then returning immediately, maintaining that connection, that silent presence that refused to break, its eyes never leaving his face for more than a second, its breathing steady, grounded, almost as if it was lending him something, something he had lost, something he needed to keep going, and every now and then it would nudge him again, softer now, not trying to wake him, but reminding him, stay here, don't drift, not now. The storm outside intensified again, the wind striking the vehicle from the side, pushing against it, testing its stability, sand hitting the metal in waves, reducing visibility to almost nothing, turning the world beyond the windshield into a blurred, shifting wall of motion, and inside, the tension tightened, because time wasn't just passing, it was closing in, each minute making the distance to safety feel longer, heavier, harder to reach. The soldier's body jerked suddenly. A sharp, involuntary movement. Then still again. Then another. And immediately, attention snapped toward him, voices rising, hands adjusting, checking his airway, his pulse, his breathing, searching for signs, any signs that pointed toward stability, but instead, what they found was something worse, something deeper, something internal, something that couldn't be seen, but was clearly taking hold. His pulse weakened. Irregular. Fading. The dog reacted instantly. Its body stiffened, head lifting slightly, eyes narrowing as it leaned closer, pressing its muzzle gently against his chest, as if trying to feel more, to confirm something that it already understood in a way no one else could, and then it let out a low sound, not a bark, not a growl, something quieter, something that carried tension, urgency, something that didn't belong to instinct but to awareness. The vehicle hit uneven ground. A sudden jolt. Everything shifted slightly. And for a second, his breathing stopped. Completely. Silence filled the space in a way that felt unnatural, wrong, like something had just been pulled away too quickly, too suddenly, and hands moved faster now, sharper, pressing, adjusting, calling out, trying to bring him back, trying to force life into something that had just gone still, and the dog didn't move away, didn't hesitate. It pressed closer, its body tense, its eyes locked, waiting, holding, refusing to accept what was happening in front of it. Then, a faint sound. A weak inhale. Small, broken, but enough, just enough. Everything shifted again, tension snapping into action, hands stabilizing, adjusting, working with renewed urgency, because now there was something to hold onto again, something that hadn't disappeared completely, and the dog lowered its head again, pressing closer, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment, as if it knew it would come, as if it refused to believe in anything else. Outside, the storm began to change. Not stopping, but shifting. The wind easing slightly, the sand becoming less dense, the outlines of the horizon slowly beginning to return, faint shapes emerging through the blur, distant structures, something ahead, something solid, something that wasn't just endless desert, and inside the vehicle, that small change carried weight, because it meant something else too. They were getting closer. Closer to help. Closer to something that could do more than just delay the inevitable. But it also meant something else. Something quieter. Something no one said. He had to make it. Through this. Through the next minutes. Through the next breaths. Because if he didn't, none of it would matter. The dog stayed exactly where it was, its body still, grounded, present in a way nothing else could be, its eyes softening slightly but never losing focus, never drifting, as if it understood that the fight wasn't over, that this wasn't the moment to relax, that this was just the beginning of something harder, something deeper, something that would demand more than survival alone. And as the vehicle pushed forward, leaving the storm behind inch by inch, carrying with it one fragile life that refused to disappear, one silent protector that refused to leave, and a tension that hadn't even begun to fade, one thing became clear: they had brought him back from the edge once. But the real fight hadn't even started yet. Part 5 Right in paragraph without heading. Please. The moment the vehicle crossed the edge of the storm, the world changed, not completely, not safely, but enough to reveal what lay ahead, a distant outpost barely visible against the horizon, structures rising out of the sand like something that had been holding its ground for too long, and inside the vehicle, that sight carried a weight that no one spoke about. Because hope in situations like this was dangerous, fragile, something that could disappear just as quickly as it appeared, and yet, it was there, quiet but undeniable, pushing them forward with a different kind of urgency, because now it wasn't just about escaping the storm. It was about reaching something before it was too late. The soldier's condition hadn't stabilized. If anything, it had become more unpredictable. His breathing came in uneven waves, sometimes shallow, sometimes forced, as if his body couldn't decide whether to keep fighting or finally let go, his pulse weak, inconsistent, fading in and out in a rhythm that didn't make sense, and every now and then, his body would twitch slightly, small involuntary movements that carried more meaning than they should, because they weren't signs of recovery. They were signs of something breaking down deeper inside. The hands working on him didn't stop. They couldn't. Adjusting, pressing, checking, repeating, doing everything possible to keep him anchored to something that was already slipping away, voices low but sharp, focused, controlled, because panic had no place here, not when every second mattered, not when one mistake could mean the difference between pulling him back or losing him completely. And through all of it, the dog stayed. Closer now than before. Its body pressed firmly against his side, its warmth becoming a constant presence against the cold that had begun to take over his skin, its head resting near his chest, eyes never leaving him, not even when the vehicle shifted, not even when hands moved between them. It adjusted, always adjusting, but never leaving, never creating distance, as if distance itself had become something unacceptable, something dangerous. The outpost grew closer. details becoming clearer. Walls, movement, figures waiting. And as the vehicle approached, the atmosphere inside changed again, tension sharpening, actions becoming faster, more deliberate, because this was the moment everything had been building toward, the point where control would shift, where what they could do here would no longer be enough, where his survival would depend on something beyond this space. The vehicle stopped abruptly. Doors opened. Voices rose. Hands reached in. And suddenly, everything moved at once. The soldier was lifted carefully but quickly, his body unresponsive, head falling slightly to the side, his breathing barely noticeable now, so faint it almost disappeared entirely between moments, and as they carried him out, the world outside hit differently, colder air, sharper sounds, movement everywhere, but none of it mattered to him, not anymore, because he wasn't fully there. The dog jumped out immediately. No hesitation. No pause. Staying beside him as they moved, keeping pace, its eyes fixed on him even as everything else blurred into motion around them, voices calling out, orders being given, doors opening ahead, bright lights spilling out from inside, and for a brief second, as they crossed that threshold, something shifted again, something subtle, something almost invisible. His fingers moved. Just slightly. A small twitch. But real. The dog saw it instantly. Its head lifted, ears twitching, body tightening as it leaned closer, following that movement with absolute focus, as if that tiny, almost meaningless action carried more weight than anything else happening around them, because to the dog, it wasn't small. It was everything. Inside, the environment changed completely. Controlled, bright, structured. Hands replaced hands. New voices. New urgency. The soldier was placed down, surrounded immediately, people moving with precision, equipment being brought in, lights adjusted, monitors connected, everything happening at once in a way that blurred together, but carried purpose, carried direction, carried something that hadn't existed before, a chance. The dog was pushed back slightly. Just enough to create space. But it didn't leave. It stayed right at the edge, watching, waiting, its body still but ready, its breathing steady but heavy, its eyes locked on him, following every movement, every adjustment, every sign that something might change. And then, everything went quiet. Not silent, but focused. The kind of quiet that only happens when something critical is about to happen. The kind where every second stretches, where every breath matters, where everything balances on something that can't be controlled anymore. The soldier's chest rose, fell, then stopped. Completely. For longer this time. Too long. And in that moment, everything froze. Hands paused. Eyes shifted. The room tightened around a single point. The dog stepped forward. One step. Closer. Its eyes locked on him. Unmoving. Unblinking. Waiting. Refusing. And somewhere in that stillness, something was about to change. Something that would decide everything. Something that no one could predict. Because this time, there might not be another breath. And if there wasn't, there would be nothing left to bring back. Part 6. Write in paragraph for a moment that felt longer than time itself. Nothing happened. The kind of stillness that presses against the air and makes every heartbeat louder than it should be, except there was no heartbeat here, no visible sign of life, just a body lying under harsh light surrounded by hands that had stopped mid-motion, eyes locked onto monitors that showed nothing but a flat, unforgiving line, and in that silence, something heavy settled into the room, something that didn't need to be spoken because everyone understood exactly what it meant. They had seen it before, too many times, the moment when everything stops and doesn't come back. But the dog didn't understand it like they did. Or maybe it refused to. It stepped forward again, ignoring the tension, ignoring the stillness, its body moving with quiet determination until it reached the edge of the table, its eyes fixed on the man's face, searching for something, anything, a movement, a breath, a sign that what it felt deep inside was still true, and when it didn't find it immediately, it didn't retreat, didn't accept it. Instead, it pressed closer, its front paws lifting slightly against the edge, its nose reaching forward, touching his arm, nudging gently at first, then again, a little stronger, as if trying to wake him from something deeper than sleep. The room reacted. Voices shifted. Some sharp, some uncertain. Because this wasn't protocol. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. But something about the moment held him back. Something about the way the dog moved, the way it refused to step away, the way it didn't panic, didn't react with confusion or fear, but with something else. Something steady, something intentional. The monitor remained flat, unchanging. A line that meant nothing was happening. Nothing at all. And still, the dog stayed. It let out a low sound again, softer than before, almost a whisper, something that carried tension, insistence, something that didn't belong in a place like this, and then it pressed its head gently against his chest, right over his heart, holding it there for a second longer than expected, as if it was listening, as if it was waiting for something no one else could hear. And then, it happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, almost invisible flicker. A change. So slight it could have been missed. But it wasn't. One of the monitors reacted first. A tiny shift. A break in the line. Then another. And suddenly, a weak, irregular pulse appeared. Not strong. Not stable. But there. Real. The room snapped back to life instantly. Movement exploded again, hands returning with urgency, voices rising with renewed focus, commands given faster, sharper, more precise, because now everything had changed again. Now there was something to fight for, something that hadn't disappeared completely, something that could still be pulled back if they moved fast enough, if they didn't lose it again. The dog stepped back slightly, just enough to allow space, but its eyes never left him, its body still tense, still ready, as if it understood that this wasn't the end of the fight, just a moment within it, just a fragile opening that could close again at any second. The soldier's chest jerked suddenly. A weak inhale. Then another. Forced. Painful. But real. The air returned to him in broken pieces, uneven, uncontrolled, but present, and every breath he took now felt like it was being pulled from somewhere far away, somewhere he wasn't fully connected to yet, his body reacting before his mind could follow, his existence hanging between two places that hadn't fully separated. Time shifted again. From seconds to something more structured, more controlled, more deliberate. Stabilization. Intervention. Movement towards something deeper, something more complex, something that couldn't be done here in this open space, and as decisions were made quickly, as preparations began to move him further inside, to take him somewhere beyond immediate reach, the dog stayed exactly where it was, watching every second, following every movement, its presence unchanged, unwavering. Because for it, nothing had been resolved. Not yet. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun again. And as they moved him away, deeper into the facility, through doors that closed behind him, separating him from the open room, from the chaos, from everything that had brought him back to this point, the dog stopped at the threshold, standing still for the first time, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. It watched as he disappeared from sight, as the doors closed, as the connection became something it could no longer physically maintain. But even then, it didn't leave. It stayed right there, waiting, listening, as if it knew, somewhere beyond instinct, that this wasn't the moment to walk away. Because sometimes, the hardest part of saving someone isn't bringing them back. It's waiting to see if they stay. Part 7 right in paragraph without heading time lost its shape on the other side of those closed doors, stretching into something that couldn't be measured by minutes or hours, because for the dog waiting in that silent hallway, nothing existed except what was happening beyond that barrier, a place it couldn't see into, couldn't follow, couldn't control, and yet refused to walk away from, its body resting but never relaxed. Its ears constantly shifting at the smallest sound, every movement. Inside echoing faintly through the walls, every distant voice, every metallic clink, every hurried step becoming something it tried to understand, something it tried to connect back to the man it had refused to lose. The hallway remained cold. Still. Unforgiving. People passed by, some slowing for a second, some not noticing at all, but the dog stayed exactly where it was, positioned just outside the door, its eyes fixed forward, as if staring through something solid, as if distance didn't exist, as if it could still feel him on the other side, still track the fragile rhythm that had almost disappeared. Inside, everything had shifted into precision. Controlled urgency. The kind that doesn't allow hesitation. The soldier's body lay surrounded by focused movement, hands working in coordination, lights brighter now, sharper, machines tracking what little stability he had regained, numbers rising and falling in patterns that didn't promise anything, only suggested possibility, and even that was uncertain, because the damage ran deep, deeper than what could be seen immediately, deeper than what quick intervention could fix. His breathing was supported now, forced into rhythm, kept alive by something outside of himself. And yet, something within him still resisted, still fought, still refused to disappear completely. Moments passed where everything seemed stable. Then suddenly, it wasn't. The monitor would shift. Numbers dropping. Alarms rising slightly. Adjustments made instantly. Every second becoming a battle between what was being done and what his body was trying to give up. And through all of it, there was no guarantee. Not even close. Outside, the dog remained unmoving. Its patience wasn't passive. It was active. Constant. Focused. Every small sound from inside pulling its attention tighter, its body responding in subtle ways, muscles tightening, ears lifting, head shifting slightly, as if it could feel the changes happening beyond that door, as if it understood that this wasn't a single fight, but many small ones happening again and again. At one point, the hallway grew quieter. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels different. Heavy. And the dog reacted instantly. Standing up fully now, its body rigid, ears forward, eyes locked on the door, as if something had just changed in a way it couldn't ignore. And for a moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. Fast. Voices. Urgent. The door opened briefly, just enough for movement to pass through, and in that short moment, the dog caught a glimpse, a flash of light, of motion, of people moving faster than before, of tension that had sharpened again, and without hesitation, it stepped forward, trying to follow, but was stopped immediately, hands blocking gently but firmly, guiding it back, not with force, but with necessity. The door closed again, and the dog remained there. But something had changed. It could feel it. Not in a way that could be explained, but in a way that didn't need explanation. Inside, the situation had shifted again. Unstable. Worse than before. The soldier's body reacted violently now, small movements becoming sharper, irregular, his pulse fluctuating in ways that made control difficult, his breathing struggling against the support being given, as if something deeper inside him was resisting, pushing back, pulling him towards something darker, something quieter, something final. Hands moved faster. Voices sharper. Instructions clearer. No room for error now. No time for hesitation. And still, no certainty. Because this wasn't just about injury anymore. This was about whether he could stay. Whether he would choose to stay. whether something inside him still had enough strength to fight back. Outside, the dog lowered its head slightly, pressing closer to the door, its body still, its breathing slow but heavy, as if it was grounding itself, holding on to something invisible, something that stretched beyond walls, beyond distance, beyond understanding. And for a moment, everything balanced again. Between staying and leaving. Between fighting and fading. Between something that had already almost ended, and something that refused to end at all. And no one knew which side would win. Please write in paragraph part 8 inside that room, where every second carried weight far heavier than time itself. Something began to shift in a way no one could fully explain, not because the machine suddenly stabilized, not because the numbers magically corrected themselves, but because beneath all the controlled chaos, beneath the layers of intervention and urgency, there was a subtle resistance building again. Something quiet but undeniable, as if the soldier's body, after being pushed to the edge over and over again, had found something buried deep enough to hold on to, something that hadn't completely broken. His breathing, still supported, began to respond differently, less forced, slightly more aligned, not stable, not safe, but less chaotic than before, and the change was small enough that it didn't stop the movement around him, didn't slow the hands working, didn't soften the focus in the room, but it was there, just enough to shift the direction of the fight from desperate reaction to something closer to control. The monitors reflected it slowly. Tiny adjustments. Small improvements. Nothing dramatic. But real. And in situations like this, real was enough to keep going. Outside the door, the dog felt it before it could see anything, before any sound changed, before any movement confirmed it. Something in the air shifted, something in the tension that had been pressing against everything began to loosen just slightly, and its body reacted without hesitation, lifting its head, ears rising, posture changing from rigid to alert in a different way, not because the danger had passed, but because something had stopped getting worse. Time moved forward again. Not stuck. Not frozen. But still fragile. Still uncertain. Inside, the effort didn't stop, because this wasn't victory, not even close. It was just a moment where the fall had slowed, where the descent had been interrupted long enough to try and pull him upward again, and everyone in that room understood that clearly, understood that this could reverse at any second, understood that stability here was temporary until it wasn't. The soldier's body responded again. Another breath. Stronger this time. Still uneven. Still painful. But more present. His fingers twitched again, slightly more noticeable than before, a faint signal that something deeper inside him was reconnecting, something that had been fading was trying to return, and while his eyes remained closed, his awareness still distant, there was something changing beneath the surface, something pushing back against the darkness that had nearly taken him completely. The room adjusted with it. Movements became more precise, less reactive, more focused on maintaining what had just been regained, because now the fight had shifted from pulling him back to keeping him there. Outside, the hallway remained quiet again, but not heavy like before, not suffocating, just still, and the dog remained exactly where it had been, but its body no longer carried the same tension, its breathing slower now, more controlled, its eyes still locked on the door, but softer, not because it was relaxed, but because something inside it recognized the change, recognized that the moment had shifted, even if it wasn't over. The door opened again. This time slower. Less urgent. And for the first time since it had closed, the energy that came through it wasn't sharp or chaotic, it was focused, steady, controlled, and the dog stood immediately, stepping forward without hesitation, its eyes searching past everything, past the movement, past the people, looking only for one thing. It didn't see him directly. Not yet. But it felt it. The change. The difference. And that was enough. Inside, the soldier remained suspended between two states, not fully returned, not fully gone, but closer now to something that could be called survival, something that could hold, something that could continue if nothing else broke. And while the danger hadn't disappeared, while the uncertainty still surrounded everything, there was something new now, something that hadn't existed before. A direction. Forward. Slow. Fragile. But forward. And sometimes, in moments like this, that was all it took to change everything. Please write in paragraph part 9 hours passed in a way that no longer felt chaotic, but still didn't feel safe. The kind of slow movement where nothing dramatic happens, yet everything remains uncertain, where each breath continues but never guarantees the next, and inside the controlled environment, the soldier remained suspended in that fragile space between survival and loss, his body no longer collapsing the way it had before, but not strong enough to stand on its own, not yet. His breathing still assisted, his pulse still monitored closely, every small fluctuation tracked, analyzed, adjusted, because now the goal had changed again, not just to bring him back, but to keep him from slipping away once more. The room had quieted. Not empty, but focused. The kind of quiet that comes when the immediate danger is past, but the real outcome hasn't been decided yet, when everyone knows that one wrong shift, one unexpected change, could pull everything back into chaos again, and so nothing was taken lightly, nothing was assumed, every second still mattered, just in a different way now. Outside, the dog remained. It hadn't moved far from the door, not even when the hallway emptied, not even when the urgency faded into something slower. It stayed in that same position, grounded, patient, watching, listening, as if its presence alone was part of the process, part of whatever invisible connection still existed between them, and every now and then it would shift slightly, adjust its stance, lift its head as if catching something faint, something distant, something only it could sense. Then, finally, the moment came. The door opened fully this time. Not rushed. Not abrupt. Just steady. And the dog reacted instantly, standing up, stepping forward without hesitation, its eyes focused, its body moving with quiet certainty as it crossed the threshold for the first time since being held back. No resistance now, no hand stopping it, no urgency blocking its path, because something had changed enough to allow it. Inside, the environment felt different. Still controlled, still serious, but not critical, not on the edge anymore. The soldier lay there, surrounded by machines that now moved in steady rhythms instead of unstable ones, the sharp tension in the room replaced by something quieter, something more measured, and for the first time since everything had begun, his chest rose in a way that looked natural, not forced, not pulled, but his own. The dog approached slowly, not rushing, not jumping, just moving forward with quiet intention, its eyes never leaving him, its steps careful, almost deliberate, as if it understood that this moment required something different, something calmer, something steady, and when it reached his side, it stopped, lowering its head slightly, watching, waiting. For a second, nothing happened. Then, his fingers moved again. Slight, weak, but unmistakable. The dog reacted immediately, stepping closer, its nose brushing gently against his hand, holding there for a moment, as if confirming what it already knew, as if grounding that small movement into something real, something that couldn't disappear again. His breathing continued, steady, slow, but his own. And then, his eyes shifted, not opening fully, not focusing, but moving. A small reaction, a sign, something deeper beginning to reconnect. The room didn't react loudly, didn't break the quiet, because this wasn't a moment for noise. This was a moment for understanding, for recognizing that what had been nearly lost had been held onto. Not completely, not safely, but enough to continue. The dog stayed close, lowering its body beside him again, resting just enough to remain connected, its presence constant, unchanged, as if nothing that had happened could ever separate that bond, not distance, not silence, not even the edge of death itself. And for the first time since the battlefield had fallen silent, since the storm had swallowed everything, since the world had decided to move on without him, something had been proven. He wasn't left behind. Not really. Because something, had refused to let him disappear. And that refusal had changed everything. But even now, even with breath returned, with life slowly rebuilding itself piece by piece, the story hadn't ended. Because survival was only the beginning of what came next. Please write in paragraph part 10 last part. The silence that followed wasn't the same kind that had surrounded the battlefield. It wasn't heavy or final. It was quiet in a different way, a quiet that carried something fragile but real, something that had been rebuilt from the edge of nothing, and in that stillness, the soldier remained suspended between exhaustion and awareness, his body no longer fighting to stay alive, but not yet strong enough to move forward, his breathing steady now, slow, controlled, each inhale belonging to him again, not forced, not taken, but his. Days passed, though they didn't feel like days to him. They came in fragments, in blurred moments where light shifted and voices appeared and disappeared, where pain came and went in waves, where memories tried to surface but never fully formed, and through all of it, there was always something constant, something grounded, something that never left, the presence beside him. The dog. It stayed closer now than ever before, no longer waiting outside doors, no longer held back by distance or urgency, but resting beside him, watching, listening, its body calm but always aware, as if it understood that this part of the fight required something different, not action, not movement, but presence, patience, and a kind of loyalty that didn't need to prove itself anymore. At first, the soldier didn't fully recognize it. Not consciously. Not clearly. But somewhere beneath the confusion, beneath the fading pain and the broken pieces of memory, something familiar lingered, something that didn't feel like the rest, something that didn't belong to the chaos or the damage, something that felt steady, safe. And slowly, that awareness began to grow. His eyes opened longer now, not just flickers, not just reactions, but moments where he stayed present, where he could focus, where he could feel the space around him, and the first time his gaze settled fully, clearly, it didn't land on the machines, or the walls, or the people moving around him. It landed on the dog. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. There were no words. No understanding of time. No memory of how he got here. Just recognition. Deep, immediate, unquestionable. His hand moved. Weak, slow, but intentional. Reaching. And the dog responded instantly, lifting its head, moving closer, closing that small distance without hesitation, its eyes soft now, not tense, not searching, just present, as if this was the moment it had been waiting for all along, not the rescue, not the survival, but this. The connection. The confirmation. That he was still there. That he hadn't been lost. His fingers touched its fur. Barely. But enough. And something shifted in that moment, something quiet but powerful, something that didn't need explanation, because it wasn't about what had happened. It was about what hadn't. He hadn't been left. Not truly. Not completely. Because even when everything else had moved on, when the storm had erased the battlefield, when time had nearly taken him, there had been something that refused to let go. Something that stayed. Something that chose him. Recovery wasn't immediate. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments where strength failed, where pain returned, where progress slowed to almost nothing, but it never went backward to where it had been, never returned to that edge where everything had almost ended, because now there was something anchoring him, something constant, something that reminded him, even in the hardest moments, that he had already survived the part that mattered most. And the dog remained through all of it, not as a guard, not as a tool, but as something more. A presence, a bond, a quiet force that didn't demand anything, didn't expect anything, but gave everything without hesitation. Weeks later, when he finally stood again, unsteady but alive, when his steps felt unfamiliar but possible, when the world outside those walls became real again, it wasn't the desert he remembered, it wasn't the battlefield, it wasn't the chaos. It was something quieter, something different, something that came after. And beside him, as always, was the dog. Not leading, not pulling, just walking, close, steady, unshaken. And in that moment, as the wind moved softly instead of violently, as the sky stretched wide instead of closing in, as the silence felt peaceful instead of empty, one truth remained stronger than anything else that had happened. He had almost been lost, almost erased, almost forgotten. But loyalty had refused. And because of that, he was still here. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change a life forever.